Hey, welcome in everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. It is now Thursday, February 26th. We got some rain, something we haven't seen a lot of today, and we did get some lightning strikes. You may have heard them up in Catawba County. I'm sure Tim and I will talk about that. We kind of speculated yesterday we might hear a couple rumbles of thunder, and sure enough we did, but it wasn't very widespread. But we look at the radar tonight. That rain has actually moved out fairly quickly, which was something we kind of anticipated. The first half of the day was going to be ugly. It did get a lot better, and some folks actually got a sunset tonight before the sun went down, which was just 15 minutes ago. That sunset getting later and later. So where's that rain right now? It's kind of pushing out towards the coastal plain, the Midlands, the low country of South Carolina. It's exiting quickly, but it's not in a big hurry to get out of here altogether. It's going to get stuck to our south, so it might linger down there, and we'll have to watch for a resurgence of moisture. One thing I do think that's going to happen tonight, because of the rain we got today and possibly some clearing skies, we could see some dense fog form in a few spots. So it's certainly something I'm going to keep a close eye on tonight into tomorrow, because that could really slow down your travel plans in the morning. Now, the amount of rain we got today, it was pretty good. It wasn't going to end the drought, but it's a half an inch to an inch in some spots, areas up towards Salisbury to Asheboro, up towards where Tim is in Greensboro. They got almost an inch of rain up there, over an inch in Raleigh. So that was a pretty good soaker, and they definitely will take that. What we're going to watch tonight, though, is that rain has kind of left behind some low-level moisture, and what's going to happen is as skies clear, the ground's going to cool down to the dew point, and you'll get the clouds to reform in the form of fog. So watch the fog kind of build here as I show you our futurecast. It gets really thick. I mean, that's 0.4 of a mile. That's less than a half-mile visibility. Could be a quarter mile in a few spots. Don't think we'll see a dense fog advisory, but I also wouldn't be shocked to see a few counties thrown into that. It lingers through tomorrow morning, especially for counties south. To the north looks a little bit better, but just a heads up, if you have travel plans tomorrow, you might want to plan for a couple extra minutes here and there to account for that morning fog, which can always slow you down. So overnight, temperatures drop to 50. That 20% chance is really more for the mist and drizzle that fog often brings. It's really not, I would say, technically rain. It's kind of just moisture floating around, but oftentimes we'll put a 20% in for that mist. And tomorrow, it all depends on how quickly that fog gets out. If we see sunshine for most of the day, we could easily be in the 60s. Otherwise, we're probably going to be in the upper 50s, but it should be dry most of the day. We're not really concerned with any rainfall, because that front, while it's not moving quickly, it does get down to the south by about 1 o'clock tomorrow, pushes off into the east, and eventually by Saturday, this is when the great weather moves in. See that big high pressure over Atlanta? That's going to give us sunny skies and temperatures in the 60s. I mean, this is probably the best weekend. Not probably. It is going to be the best weekend weather-wise of 2026 so far, because remember, we have back-to-back winter storms. The only time we've seen rain, which hasn't been a lot, it feels like it's been on the weekend. So this go-around, we actually have a completely dry weekend and very mild temperatures. No frigid conditions, 60s and 70s. Now, aches and pains, you got arthritis, got a bum knee. You might be feeling it right now. Anytime you get that cold front to move through, the pressure drops, you briefly see some unpleasantness, because what happens, you think about the barometer, it's the pressure pushing down on your body, and if you have fluid in your joints, when the pressure is low, that pressure causes your joints to expand a little bit, the fluid in there, just like your ears popping when you go up in an airplane or an elevator or up in elevation. Instead of your ears popping, the fluid in your joints will expand, and that will put pressure on them and cause some discomfort, and in some cases it will cause pain. But once we see the high pressure move in, that kind of gets reduced and actually gets a lot better. So no big fronts in the next 7 days to really cause you a lot of issues. Now, rainfall, we talked about the drought. I'll show you the drought monitor here in a minute. We don't have much in the forecast. The rain chances tonight and tomorrow are really just the rain to the south. I don't think that's going to amount to a whole lot. But as we always tell you about on Thursdays, the drought monitor came out and didn't get better. It got worse. This is the first time, I think since 2008, that all of North Carolina and South Carolina are in moderate drought or worse. That's pretty significant. 86% of North Carolina is in severe drought. 65% of South Carolina, and we've got those small percentages in extreme drought. So pretty serious situation, especially now that things are trying to green up. This is where you're going to really notice the drought. A lot of times during the winter, you don't notice because nothing's growing. Everything's dead anyways. It's dormant. But when things try to start growing and there's no moisture for it, you'll notice things will start dying or not growing at all. So that's something to keep an eye on. And as we use more moisture because the plant's growing, you're going to notice water restrictions and all that stuff start to pop up. We're already seeing those in Union County, which is in that red area. They have the extreme drought. They're already under voluntary water restrictions. They could become mandatory, which is what you don't want to see. And the last time I remember mandatory water restrictions, you couldn't water your grass except for every other day. Based on your last name, the letter in your last name. It was really weird. You couldn't wash your car at home. You can't fill up your pool. And people would like kind of rat on their neighbors. There was a tip line to call people in if they were watering on the wrong day, and you get a fine. So that's something that is possible. It's happened before, but hopefully we don't get to that point, because trust me, there's nothing worse when you got neighbors calling on neighbors about watering their grass. It gets pretty bad around here. So we'll see if that happens as we get into the spring, because that's when water usage spikes. One thing I will tell you, there's a brief cold snap coming up on Monday, Tuesday, which I'm sure Tim and I will talk about. It looks pretty miserable on Monday, Tuesday. I'm not going to lie. It looks like a cold rain, but then it's right back to the 70s. This is a wild pattern setting up next week. Cold start, but by the end of the week, we're way above average. And you think it's going to be nice this weekend, wait till next weekend. We could see temperatures in the upper 70s near 80, and that's the weekend we set our clocks ahead as well. So a double bonus, really late sunset coming up next Sunday night. It's going to be well after 7:30, so pretty crazy to see that. This weekend, beautiful. Get out and enjoy it. 68 on Saturday, 77 on Sunday. South End patios will be hopping this weekend. There will be a ton of people out enjoying this great weather. The parks, the golf courses will be packed. But again, don't be fooled, because when you look at our Cherry Hunt Supercenter 7-day, look at Monday, Tuesday after that beautiful weekend. 40s and maybe rain. Right now I'm thinking drizzle or mist, but some areas north might get a wintry mix up towards the Virginia border in the mountains. That's that cold air wedge, or damming we call it here. And then as soon as it moves out, the 70s come roaring back for Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll go 10 days into the future and show you how nice next weekend could be. That's the first full weekend of March. 77, 75, maybe rain, maybe thunderstorms with that spring-like pattern in. Also, that is the time frame that we set our clocks ahead 1 hour. We go from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. early Sunday morning. So we go to daylight saving time, which gives us that later sunset coming up Sunday night, next Sunday. And also remember, good time of year to change those batteries in your smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and your HVAC filters if you don't do that religiously like some of us do. That is definitely a good time to do it. So stick around. Coming up after the break, Tim and I are going to talk about an earthquake that happened down in South Carolina today that a lot of people felt. We'll talk about the cold air coming in next week and Tim's worry of maybe some wintry weather up his way. And I'm sure we'll talk about the drought. That's coming up in 2 minutes, so stick around. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me as always. Tim, we got a lot to talk about today. We finally got some rain, the drought monitor, which we could talk about probably the entire show. Why people don't think we're in drought, even though we're in drought. There's a lot to unpack in the drought today. But let's start with the drought, because I think that's kind of the precursor for the rain that we got today, which was a good thing. So I'll quickly show the drought monitor, Tim. And I don't think I'm not surprised by this. I think we both admitted, like, hey, it didn't rain between the last time we had this and this one. And just so everybody knows, the data runs Tuesday to Tuesday, even though the map comes out on Thursday. So we didn't get much rain in between there. So I think the big thing that I noticed, Tim, was it's been almost 20 years since all of North Carolina and all of South Carolina have been in moderate drought or worse. That was pretty significant to me. And if anything, we saw more severe drought. 86.7% of North Carolina is in severe drought. I think the severity of the drought maybe isn't what sticks out, but the widespreadness of it is, I guess that is what I would say. Pretty significant drought for the Carolinas going on right now.
It is, and long-term drought is the name of the game with this whole thing. Just saying long-term to kind of put this in people's minds that it's not talking about the last couple of weeks. Here in Greensboro, we're actually doing pretty well. Not just the last couple of weeks, but even for the year now, we're about on par for our average, which I was pretty impressed by. But this is a long-term deficit, so it's basically since last August that we've had these problems. And it is pretty impressive, like you said, Brad, to have 100% of both Carolinas in that drought status is just not something that is normal. I was reading, though, as you probably do, the kind of tidbits from the State Climate Office. And there were a couple of nuggets of hope scattered in with the bad news. So there's the bad news that says, Burke County is reporting the signs of stress on the ponds and the streams. But they also mentioned that the stream flows in the Yadkin River have bounced back to near normal levels. So that's some good news. Jordan Lake is almost back to its target level, but Falls Lake and a couple other lakes are still really low. So there's kind of more of a mixed bag of some info and nuggets here. But overall, still a tough situation, going to be probably months to fix it, not weeks to fix it. But overall, hopefully we can get back into more of a regular rain pattern, and we've done better the last few weeks than we had the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is like, like we talked about this yesterday. Has the pattern completely flipped to a wetter pattern? No, but it's kind of gotten back to at least a normal pattern, I think, is one way to look at it. We're kind of, we're back to level. We need to go swing a little bit the other way for a little bit. We don't need to be there for weeks and months, but maybe just a little bit, or maybe just one good, like several inch storm on top of the normal rain might be the kind of thing that just starts trending. And it could be a drought too, Tim. I think people want it to go away real quickly. It could be one of those things where it might just like every week it gets a little bit better, and it might be like April or May and we're like, oh, we're finally out of the drought, and it took 2 months for that to happen. That could be the kind of scenario we have. It's not going to be just like a big massive stalled front and then we're done. I think this will be a slow go. The only concern I have, Tim, is it's great we're getting back to average, but we're now starting to see things green up. So the plant usage of water is going to really ramp up here in the next couple of weeks. So for everybody who says I got mud in my yard or puddles, you're not going to have those, not because it's dry, but because your plants are going to start using that moisture pretty quickly, and there's going to be very little moisture in the topsoil once your grass and your plants and your bushes start growing.
Yeah, I was playing the role of an angry viewer earlier today. I've got some puddles in my grass today. They're just sitting there. I'm like, this is not a drought, but we know the science, we know the story behind it, of course. And I'm kind of wondering, I don't have any way to measure this personally, but I'm wondering if the ground might still be partially frozen in some capacity or not. It's probably not at this point.
Yeah, I started looking at the soil temperatures last week when we got up to 83, and a lot of them are starting to get to that. There's like a magic soil temperature number. I only know this because I golf and I love my lawn. When you get that 50-degree soil temperature, Tim, that's kind of when you start, unfortunately, seeing weeds start growing that you're trying to get rid of. But you also start to see the grass start to green up. It's really that soil temperature. It's not the air temperature. And that's driven a lot by those overnight lows. So if the overnight lows start creeping up, you'll start to see, the grass seed will start, germinating. Unfortunately, so will all the weeds that were in your yard the whole time you didn't know. They were just sitting there dormant, waiting for it to warm up. And I noticed that today. I saw some clover and stuff starting to pop up in my yard, which is always a true sign to me that things are starting to warm up a little bit. But I don't know about you. We got about 3/10 of an inch. I mean, excuse me, 3/4 of an inch. But I was kind of surprised. Like a few areas east of you got over an inch of rain. Like Asheboro to Raleigh got a good soaking, it looked like.
Yeah, they really did. Greensboro and Charlotte were twinning today with just about 0.7 inches, it would look like. But yeah, Raleigh and Asheboro did pretty well. Some of the radar estimates over there were closer to 2 inches. I think that's a little high. But an inch plus, you'll take it, and that's pretty good to see. Of elsewhere, only about a third. That's not quite as good.
Yeah, it would be great. And that's a good point. I mean, we got a little bit out there. We just need this to happen about every 3 or 4 days now, Tim, and this would be like ideal. But looking long term, I think some crazy stuff in our forecast coming up here. We were chatting offline in this. We've got this gorgeous weekend, Tim. It looks absolutely delightful everywhere. And then Monday, Tuesday, it's like, holy cow, we've got like this wedge set up, which the wedge is one of those things. You'll hear us probably lament about it all the time. It's an incredibly tough thing to forecast. But if we get the correct setup, there's some hints that there could be some wintry mischief in there. I don't know if I'm sold on it, Tim. I certainly think it's going to be a cold, miserable rain. It does look like a wedge setup. But I wouldn't be shocked, too, especially up your way towards the Virginia border, if there might be a little bit of wintry mix in there at some point Monday or Tuesday.
It's crazy to think about because I'm very confident we'll be in the 70s on Sunday.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always matter. That doesn't always matter when it comes to the weather that follows. You're not talking about the past, you're talking about the future. So what are we looking at? I think this is probably the European model.
This is the Euro.
Like so you're showing here for, which probably to me looks a little too north and a little too dry, maybe for the Carolinas. They're forecasting a very strong area of high pressure up in the Northeast. And so for anyone watching, when you get a big, strong high up in the mid-Atlantic or the Northeast, the power of that is that it can send cold air down the East Coast. So we are very confident that Monday is going to be dramatically colder than Sunday is. Probably at minimum, we'll be at maximum, I would say, we'll be in the 40s on Monday. There's a world we could certainly be in the 30s much of the daytime on Monday. And a lot of times this time of year, we get a setup or two where we have just a nasty 35-degree rain most of the time.
Yeah.
That could happen here as we go into Monday. But there are a couple of models that, especially by Monday night, they try and drop parts of the Triad area to 29, 30 degrees.
Yeah.
Can't completely rule that out, but I don't know if I'm sold on it just yet.
This is one of the
snow out of this, but
no. This is one of those situations, Tim, we talk a lot about where like all models are wrong, but some are useful. Even in that European guidance, which I agree with you, it's way too dry and it's way too north. But if you look at the isobars, it is showing you there's a wedge there, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like I almost discount what the precip looks like. And I'm with you. I'm like, look at where the position of the high is. There's a low coming in. We know from experience that is going to produce a wedge. And even if you don't see moisture or QPF showing on the model, there's going to be at least mist or drizzle, light precipitation because of overrunning. That's the atmosphere has to do that. So the model's actually telling you that without telling you that. It's kind of a weird thing, and that's what meteorologists do. So if you ever wonder, like, why are you forecasting that? I don't see that in the models. Well, it's really pattern recognition. This is a pattern recognition setup here, where this is clearly a wedge setup, even if the model isn't showing you the specifics exactly the way you plan it to work out.
It is, and I think what I'll be watching for is, up around here, what are those surface temperatures? What's kind of the minimum we could get to?
Yeah.
And then what's the timing? Nighttime, if it's a nighttime situation where you have a little more moisture, that's when you can sometimes, even in March, you can get a little bit of an icing event that can happen. It probably wouldn't be super impactful or significant, but we've had several times here in the month of March where up in the higher levels of the trees even, maybe it's not icing on the ground, but you can get a little ice build up in the trees. It wouldn't take too much here for a quick tenth of an inch of ice or something to build up in some of those trees if it's cold enough. So we'll keep an eye on it. We simply don't know right now what the case will be. But I'll tell you, Brad, that's a really strong high. Some of the models are putting it at about 1040 or so, which in weather words, that's just really strong for early next week. And it could linger a while too. So just from a gloom and doom sense, you're probably going to be cloudy at least throughout the day on Tuesday and maybe even a little bit into Wednesday.
Yeah, you look at those isobars and just the orientation, that is probably about as perfect a high pressure position for a cold air damming event as you could have. It's over like the Hudson Valley, and we know the air is super cold up there. Yep. Remember, they had a blizzard. There's snow on the ground up there. It's not melting really quickly. So if there's a cold air mass centered over New England, that air at the surface is going to be super cold. Now, as you mentioned, if you look at the GFS or the American model, which was an amazing model output for the blizzard, it handled it very well. It's a lot moister. It actually has a lot more wintry precip. And I kind of agree with you. I think probably the snow is not likely, but the pink, there could be a mix. And we know those areas, especially to the west of you and the west of me, up there in the Yadkin Valley, over towards Wilkes County, up against Burkhalter. That's a notorious area where in this setup, they will get upslope and cold air trapped there. And they'll get ice when you don't think anybody else is going to get ice. So that would be an area I'd watch as well.
If anything happens, it would be very short-lived because you have a warm-up right before it in the 70s, and you've got a warm-up behind it, too. I mean, we're going to be really torching by the middle and end of next week. So a little intrigue here, maybe winter's last gasp of some kind Monday into Tuesday. But after that, all bets are off. I mean, you're going to go really, don't you think, Brad, I was kind of looking at this, maybe 6 to 7 days of like 70-degree weather by the end of next week.
Yeah, that was the thing. I talked about it in my shows on air tonight, that I was like, wow, this is not just like this weekend's great, but this upcoming warm spell is going to be a long duration warm spell with a lot of 70s and maybe even close to 80 a few times. And I actually had to throw a thunderstorm in the forecast next weekend because we might actually get into a spring-type setup where there might be some scattered storms. So, if we can just get through this early part of the week, Tim, I think all the spring and warm weather lovers are going to be super happy because we're going to get a extended trial run of spring here starting next week. Yeah, that setup right there, Tim, on your upper level, that is the classic Southeast Ridge. That is, if you want to have warm air in this time of year, that's what you want, the Southeast Ridge, which is, it feels like the last couple of winters, that's the winter pattern we've had. Not this winter, but most winters, that's the one that doesn't bring us snow. But that is a warm pattern right there on the upper level charts.
It's textbook. It's classic. And what happens, the reason that this works is a couple. You're bringing in southwest winds all across the southeast, so you're just steadily importing air from the tropics. It's really coming in from Mexico and the Gulf and across the southeast. So it's warm. Could also be a little humid, which is why Brad was talking about the thunder potential there. And just the way that the weather works, when you have these, we call them higher heights in the upper levels, you're just encouraging more warmth to happen. You're creating more warmth overall. There's just a lot of warmth in the atmosphere. So there's no way you're going to be cooler than average by the end of next week the way it looks right now. And kind of more confidence than usual, I would say. I don't usually talk about the long range all that much, but it just seems kind of rock solid right now toward the end of next week, except maybe for New England and the Mid-Atlantic, which is outside of our area. They could have some of those backdoor fronts.
Yeah, they might get stuck. Also, that southwest wind, everybody, that brings in the pollen as well from the southwest. I always joke, the trees around here cause enough trouble. When you get a southwest wind for a couple of days, you get all the pollen from the trees in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina. That all blows up here as well. So you see a big spike in pollen. Speaking of South Carolina, we got to talk about this. We had a significant earthquake this afternoon down in the Lake Murray area. I don't know if Jeb can bring up my laptop here, but I got it pulled up on Google Earth. So what you're looking at, if you're not familiar with this area, this is the Midlands of South Carolina. Lake Murray, it's a man-made lake. It's a beautiful lake. There's some great areas down there, Chape and Irmo. They had a magnitude 3.0 quake, and the colored-in areas, Tim, are areas where people felt the shaking. And we actually had a few areas up in the Charlotte area where people reported feeling this. And what struck me about this was when I first pulled this up, I'm going to try to pull up the the seismograph. That's the seismograph. It's a pretty sharp jump in shaking. It was very abrupt. It was only a mile deep, which is really shallow, which is the other reason I think a lot of people felt this. And so this was felt over a big area, but that's a pretty significant quake that people felt. And I got a cool video from a viewer down there, actually sent it to one of our spotter friends, Chris Jackson, who forwarded it to me. But I'm going to play this on my laptop, and I just want you to watch the camera and watch the cat on the chair when this quake hits. It's pretty amazing. The whole camera and house shook. There was a little sound there. I'll replay it again.
Wow.
But there's another video I saw, and it was so funny. The camera didn't shake, but both of their dogs got up and started barking. Like, the dogs can sense these things. It kind of blows my mind how amazing animals are that they can sense this. But pretty significant quake, and has people, I want to say shook, but it has people talking down in the Midlands, Tim. And it is fascinating because that area, this is the third quake they've seen in the last month. So I guess it technically qualifies as a quake swarm. And so it has a lot of people talking down in South Carolina.
It's interesting, and a lot of these, I guess, the Charleston area had a couple, and now you're seeing the Columbia area. We had a couple up near the Sparta area, which of course was the site of that really big one a couple of years ago as well, around 2020. So this is somewhat of a cluster, and at least maybe we're heightened to it right now. But that's a 3.0. Not all 3.0 quakes are created equal. Like that's a pretty good one, and a pretty noticeable one too. For people that might not know, what is it that kind of causes the sound when you're doing an earthquake like that?
Well, sometimes it's just the shaking of the building, but oftentimes the ground just moving makes a physical sound, and you can hear it. I think in that video, I think a lot of it was coming from the actual house. I remember when the Sparta quake occurred at my house. I felt it, but I also heard my house. It felt like the wind. You ever heard like your house creaking when the wind pushes against it? That's what it sounded like in my house.
Sure.
What I do think is interesting, Tim, and I'm just going to speculate because we had another cluster in a reservoir north of there, the Monticello Reservoir near Jenkinsville. There's actually a seismograph there now because of this. They speculated that in these man-made reservoirs, when the water level's going up or down, it adds or reduces stress on the underlying rock and could induce these earthquakes. So it could be that this is maybe drought related. Who knows? Maybe low water levels, relieving pressure is causing it. We don't know. But I thought that was interesting that could be the case. We'll see. We'll see if this was a foreshock or an aftershock in the coming weeks. So we're out of time. Stick around, though. We got more news coming up on The Plus right here.